The giant metal doors of the council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound that made the ground shake under Admiral Kim Taeho's feet. He walked into the biggest room he had ever seen in his life. The ceiling was so high he could not see the top, and the walls stretched out in all directions like they went on forever. Thousands of alien beings sat in rows that went up and up like a mountain made of seats and creatures. Kim Taeho was not a young man anymore. His hair had turned gray from many years of serving in the human space fleet. His uniform was simple and clean, but it looked very plain next to all the bright colors and strange shapes of the alien clothes around him. Behind him walked 11 other humans. They were the only humans in this massive place, and they looked very small compared to everything else there. Floor under their feet was made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Every step they took made a quiet ringing sound that echoed up to the ceiling. Kim Taeho had been in many dangerous places before, but this felt different. This was not a battle where he could fight back with ships and weapons. This was something much more frightening. Captain Park Sora walked right behind the admiral. She carried a small metal box that could send messages to every human colony in space. Her hands were steady, but her heart was beating very fast. She knew that billions of people were waiting to hear what happened in this room today. The weight of all those lives made her feel heavy, but she kept walking forward. All around them, the alien beings made different sounds. Some whistled through holes in their faces, some clicked with hard shells, some made deep humming noises that felt like thunder. The translation machines worked hard to turn all these sounds into words that humans could understand, but the noise was still overwhelming. At the front of the chamber sat the most important members of the Galactic Council. These were the beings who controlled most of the galaxy. They had power over thousands of worlds and trillions of creatures. They decided which species lived and which species died. They had been doing this for so long that most beings in the galaxy had forgotten what life was like before the council. Counselor Vextar was the biggest and most frightening of all the council members. He looked like a giant snake, but he was as smart as any computer. His scales changed colors when he had different feelings. Right now they were bright red, which meant he was angry or excited. His eyes were as big as dinner plates, and they glowed with yellow light that hurt to look at. The human group walked to the center of the chamber where a small platform waited for them. The platform was surrounded by empty space on all sides, so everyone in the room could see them. Clearly, Kim Taeho felt like he was standing in the middle of a giant bowl with thousands of hungry animals looking down at him. Lee Minho was the oldest human in the group. He had studied alien cultures for most of his life. He knew more about the different species in the galaxy than almost any other human, but even he felt scared in this place. The council had destroyed entire civilizations before, and they could do it again without even thinking about it. The chamber slowly became quiet as all the alien beings stopped talking and focused on the humans. The silence was almost worse than the noise, because now Kim Taeho could feel the weight of all those eyes watching him. He could sense the power and danger that filled this room like thick smoke. Counselor Vextar lifted his massive head high above the platform. His voice was so deep and loud that it made the crystal floor vibrate under the humans' feet. When he spoke, the translation machines turned his words into human language, but they could not hide the threat and coldness in his tone. The tribute demand was something the council had used for thousands of years. It was simple and terrible. They would tell a species to give up most of their people and resources. In return, that species would be allowed to continue existing as slaves. If they refused, the council would destroy them completely. It had worked on every species they had ever met. Kim Taeho listened to the demands without showing any emotion on his face. Earth would have to give up 60% of everything they owned. Half of all humans would be taken away to work in terrible conditions on other worlds. The rest would live under council control forever. They would never be free again, but they would still be alive. Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin was the youngest person in the human group. She had been born on a colony world far from Earth and had never seen so many different alien species in one place. Some of them were beautiful in strange ways. Others were so frightening that she had to force herself not to look away. She wondered if any of them had ever been free, or if they had all been slaves for so long they had forgotten what freedom felt like. The council members waited for the human response. They had done this so many times before that they knew exactly what would happen first. The humans would be shocked and scared. Then they would try to negotiate and ask for better terms. Then they would realize they had no choice and accept the demands. It always happened the same way. Major Kong Ji-woo stood with his hand resting on his weapon, even though he knew it would be useless. Here he was, a soldier, and soldiers were taught to fight when threatened, but there was no way to fight an entire galaxy full of enemies. The only weapons that mattered now were words and the courage to speak them. The air in the chamber felt thick and heavy, like it was hard to breathe. The alien beings shifted and moved in their seats, making sounds of anticipation. They wanted to see another species bow down before the council. They wanted to watch humans join the long list of defeated civilizations. Park Sora checked the message device one more time. She knew that across human space people were gathered around communication screens waiting to hear their fate. Families held each other tight. Children asked their parents if everything would be okay. Workers stopped their jobs to listen. Scientists and soldiers and farmers all waited for the same answer. Counselor Vextar eyes glowed brighter as he prepared to hear the human surrender. His scales shifted to a satisfied orange color. He I had heard the same words from thousands of species before. The pattern never changed. Fear always won in the end, and these humans would be no different from all the others. Kim Tae-ho took a deep breath and stepped forward. His boots made a clear, ringing sound on the crystal floor as he walked closer to the council platform. He looked up at the massive alien forms towering above him and felt the weight of his entire species' future resting on his shoulders. The moment that would change everything was about to begin. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood perfectly still in the center of the great chamber as thousands of alien eyes watched his every move. The crystal platform under his feet caught the light from above and sent rainbow colors dancing across the walls, but he did not notice any of it. His mind was focused on the single most important moment in human history. The silence in the chamber was so complete that Kim Tae-ho could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Even the alien beings had stopped making their strange breathing sounds and clicking noises. Everyone was waiting to hear what humanity would say to the council tribute to man that had brought so many other species to their knees. Captain Park Sora felt her fingers tighten around the communication device that would carry the Admiral words to every human settlement across the galaxy. She knew that right now families on Earth were gathered around their screens holding their children. Close workers on the mining colonies had stopped their machines to listen. Scientists on research stations had put down their experiments to wait for this moment. Counselor Vextar, massive serpentine form, coiled and uncoiled with impatience. His scales had shifted from red to a darker purple color that meant he was getting annoyed. The great alien leader was used to quick surrenders from the species that came before his council. He did not like having to wait for what should be an obvious answer. The Admiral took one step forward, and then another. His military boots made sharp clicking sounds on the crystal floor that seemed louder than thunder in the quiet chamber. Each step brought him closer to the council platform where the most powerful beings in the galaxy waited to hear him beg for mercy. Lee Min-ho watched his commander with growing respect. He had argued for careful negotiation and diplomatic language during their preparation meetings. He had wanted to find clever ways to soften the council demands or delay their implementation, but now he could see that Kim Tae-ho had a different plan entirely. The human delegation stood in a tight group behind their leader. Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin felt sweat running down her back. Despite the cool air in the chamber, she had trained for combat situations, but this was something no training could prepare anyone for. The fate of every human who had ever lived or ever would live was about to be decided by whatever words came out of the Admiral. Mouth Major Kang Ji-woo kept his eyes moving across the alien faces in the chamber. He was looking for signs of weakness or fear, but all he could see was confidence and cruel satisfaction. These beings had done this so many times before that they thought they already knew how it would end. They expected humanity to follow the same pattern as every other species that had stood on this platform. Kim Tae-ho stopped walking when he reached the exact center of the platform. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him like a mountain. Every choice made by every human leader before him had led to this single moment. Everything that happened next would flow from whatever he said in the next few seconds. The Admiral looked up at Counselor Vexter, enormous glowing eyes. He did not flinch or look away, even though the alien leader was easily 10 times his size. The serpentine being lowered his massive head closer to the platform until Kim Tae-ho could see his own reflection in those terrible yellow orbs around the chamber. Other council members leaned forward in anticipation. Counselor Zephyros floated closer on currents of air, his translucent jellyfish body pulsing with excited bioluminescent patterns. Counselor Thrackmore shifted his rocky mountain-like bulk forward, causing small earthquakes in the floor. The gathered representatives of 1,000 subject species watched with expressions that mixed pity and relief that it was not their turn to face this judgment. Park Sora activated the communication device with a soft beep that seemed incredibly loud in the silence. She knew that across human space the message would reach every person at exactly the same moment. Children playing in Earth parks would hear it. Factory workers on the outer colonies would stop their machines. Scientists studying distant stars would pause their research. Everyone would know at once. The Admiral's voice, when he finally spoke, was calm and clear without any trace of fear or uncertainty. He did not shout or whisper, but used the exact tone he would use to give any other military order. His words carried across the vast chamber without needing amplification, and the translation devices instantly converted them into every alien language. Kim Tae-ho looked directly at Counselor Vextar and said the single word that would change the galaxy forever. No, the word hit the chamber like a physical blow that knocked the air out of everyone present for several long seconds. Nobody moved or breathed or made any sound at all. The translation devices sparked and hummed as they processed the simple response, sending it out in hundreds of different alien languages, but the meaning was unmistakable in every single one. Counselor Vextar's massive form recoiled as if he had been struck by lightning. His scales flashed through a dozen different colors, showing confusion, shock, and growing rage. His enormous eyes widened until they looked like burning suns in his serpentine head. The great alien leader had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, but he had never heard such a simple, direct refusal to council authority. Around the chamber, alien beings began making sounds of disbelief. Some whistled in high-pitched tones that hurt human ears. Others clicked their mandibles or shells in rapid patterns that sounded like machine gun fire. The floating jellyfish creatures pulsed with colors that had no names in human language, while the Rocky Mountain beings rumbled like distant earthquakes. Dali Minho watched the alien reactions with the fascination of a scientist. Observing a unique phenomenon, he could see fear beginning to mix with their anger and confusion. These beings had built their entire civilization on the assumption that every species would eventually submit to their demands. They had no plan for what to do when someone simply refused. Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin felt a strange sense of pride growing in her chest as she watched the chaos spreading through the chamber. The youngest member of the human delegation had grown up hearing stories about the Great Council and their unstoppable power, but now she could see that power cracking and breaking just from one simple word spoken. With enough conviction, the communication device in Captain Park's Sora hands was already transmitting the Admiral response to every corner of human space. She could imagine the reactions as the message reached different worlds. Some people would cheer and celebrate, while others would be terrified of what came next. But all of them would know that their species had chosen to stand up rather than kneel down. Magic Kong Ji-woo hand moved instinctively toward his weapon as he saw the alien agitation growing around them, but he forced himself to stay calm and keep his hands at his sides. This was not a battle that could be won with guns or bombs. This was a war of will and determination, and humanity had just fired the first shot. Kim Tae-ho remained perfectly still in the center of the platform as chaos erupted around him. He had delivered his message, and now he would stand by it no matter what happened next. The Admiral knew that his single word had just declared war on the most powerful force in the galaxy, but he also knew that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. The great chamber exploded into chaos as the meaning of humanity's single-word answers spread through the thousands of alien beings like wildfire. The sound was incredible and terrifying at the same time. Creatures that had never made noise before suddenly screamed and roared, while others that usually spoke in whispers now shouted at the top of their voices. Counselor Vexstar thrashed his massive serpentine body back and forth, making the entire platform shake under the humans' feet. His scales flashed between bright red and deep purple so fast they looked like lightning strikes. His enormous eyes burned with rage and something else that looked almost like fear. The Great Council leader had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, but nothing like this had ever happened before. Dali Minho stepped closer to Admiral Kim Tae-ho as alien beings all around them began standing up and pointing in their direction. Some of the creatures were so angry they were spitting or shooting streams of liquid from their bodies. Others were making gestures that clearly meant violence, even if the humans did not understand the specific meanings. The translation machines throughout the chamber were working so hard they began smoking and sparking. Trying to convert hundreds of different alien languages all being spoken at once was more than the devices could handle. Some of them shut down completely, while others started mixing languages together, creating sentences that made no sense at all. Captain Park Sora kept her communication device pressed close to her chest, protecting it from the chaos around them. She knew that humans across the galaxy were still listening and waiting to hear what happened next. The device was their only connection to home, and she would die before letting anything happen to it. Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin had never seen anything like the alien reaction before. During her training, she had studied videos of different species, but seeing them in person when they were angry and scared was completely different. Some of the creatures looked like they wanted to jump down from their seats and attack the humans right there on the platform. A floating jellyfish being drifted down toward the human group, its translucent body pulsing with angry red patterns. This was Counselor Zephyros, one of the oldest and most respected members of the council. His voice came through the translation devices as a series of musical tones that somehow conveyed more threat than any shouting could. Counselor Zephyros spoke directly to Kim Tae-ho, his words cutting through the noise in the chamber like a sharp knife. You cannot mean what you have said, human. Your species chooses death over wisdom. Your children will curse your name when our fleets turn your worlds to ash. The Admiral looked up at the floating creature without showing any fear on his face. He had faced death many times before in battles across human space, and he was not going to start being afraid now. I mean exactly what I said, Counselor. Our answer is no, and it will always be no. Maja Kang Ji-woo watched the alien reactions with a soldier eye for danger. He could see that some of the creatures were so angry they might actually try to attack, despite all the rules and protocols of the council chamber. The Rocky Mountain being called Counselor Thrackmore looked especially dangerous as small pieces of stone fell from his body like an avalanche. The noise in the chamber was getting louder and more frightening as more alien species joined in the shouting. Some were demanding immediate punishment for the humans, while others seemed to be arguing about what the refusal actually meant. A few were making sounds that might have been laughter, but it was the kind of laughter that came from seeing something so crazy. It was almost funny. Lee Min-ho had studied the council for most of his adult life, and he knew this was completely unprecedented. No species in recorded galactic history had ever given such a flat, direct refusal to a tribute demand. There had been attempts at negotiation, desperate pleas for mercy, and even some fighting, but never just a simple no spoken with complete confidence. Vexstar finally managed to control his thrashing and bring his massive head Down close to the platform again, his scales had settled into a dark purple color that meant he was trying to think clearly despite his rage. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but somehow more menacing. You do not understand what you have done, little mammals. The Council has weapons that can crack planets in half. We have fleets that number in the millions. We have technologies that can move stars themselves. What does your infant species possess that could possibly stand against such power? Kim Tae-ho smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and somehow that small expression was more frightening than all the alien rage combined. That counselor, it is exactly what you are about to find out. Captain Park. Sora felt a chill run down her spine as she heard the confidence in her commander voice. She knew that the Admiral was not the kind of man to make empty threats or speak without having a plan. But what could humanity possibly have that would worry beings who controlled half the galaxy? The chamber began to quiet down as the alien beings realized that something was different about these humans. Every other species that had stood on the platform had eventually broken down and begged for mercy, but the human delegation looked more confident now than they had when they first walked into the room. Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin noticed that some of the alien representatives were starting to look worried instead of just angry. The younger ones, who had never seen a tribute refusal before, were asking questions of the older beings, who seemed to be giving answers that made everyone even more nervous. Counselor Thrackmore, massive rocky form shifted forward, causing small earthquakes in the floor around the platform. His voice sounded like boulders crashing down a mountain when he spoke. Humans have existed in this galaxy for barely a moment. You have no ancient weapons or forgotten technologies. You are children playing with fire that will burn your entire species to nothing. Lee Minho stepped forward to stand beside his admiral, his diplomat training taking over despite the incredible tension in the room. We are indeed a young species, Counselor Thrackmore, but youth has advantages that age sometimes forgets. We learn quickly, we adapt faster, and we do not carry the burden of assuming that things must always be the way they have always been. The alien beings in the chamber were starting to whisper among themselves instead of shouting. The humans' calm confidence in the face of overwhelming odds was beginning to worry them. More than one council member was remembering old stories about species that had, it seemed, weak but turned out to be more dangerous than anyone expected. Magic Kong Jiwoo could feel the mood in the chamber changing from angry certainty to nervous confusion. The aliens were beginning to realize that humanity's response was not just brave stupidity but something much more planned and deliberate. The human delegation had not come here to surrender, and they had not come here to negotiate. They had come here to deliver a message. Kim Tae-ho looked around the vast chamber, taking in the thousands of alien faces that were now showing doubt instead of just contempt. He knew that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity lived as free beings or died as martyrs, but either way they would not live as slaves. The whispers and nervous sounds in the chamber slowly died down as the alien beings waited to see what the humans would do next. The council members, who had been so confident just minutes before, now looked uncertain and worried. They had expected a quick surrender followed by the usual ceremony of submission, but instead they were facing something they had never encountered before. Counselor Vexstar, massive serpentine form coiled tighter around his section of the council platform. His scales had shifted to a dark blue color that meant he was thinking hard and trying to understand what was happening. The great alien leader had destroyed entire civilizations before, but always after they had tried to fight with weapons and armies. These humans seemed to have a different kind of plan. Admiral Kim Tae-ho reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like nothing more than a simple metal cube. But when he pressed a button on its surface, the air above the human delegation began to shimmer and glow until a three-dimensional image appeared floating in space for everyone in the chamber to see. Hologram showed a star map of human space, but it was not the same map the council had in their files. This one showed thousands of installations that the aliens had never seen before, hidden shipyards built inside hollow asteroids, secret research stations disguised as mining operations, military bases constructed in the empty space between solar systems, where no one would think to look. Lee Minho watched the alien reactions with growing satisfaction as the scope of humanity preparations became clear. The beings who had thought they knew everything about human capabilities were seeing for the first time what their target species had really been doing for the past 50 years. The holographic display shifted to show massive construction projects that dwarfed anything the Council had seen from such a young species. Entire planets had been converted into factory worlds, producing ships and weapons at an incredible rate. Asteroid belts had been strip mined to provide raw materials for projects so large they could be seen from orbit. Captain Park Sora felt her heart racing as she watched the alien faces change from confusion to shock to something that might actually be fear. The communication device in her hands was transmitting everything back to human space, where she knew people were cheering and crying at the same time as they realized their species had not been helpless after. Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin stared at the hologram in amazement, even though she had been briefed on some of these projects before. The scale of what humanity had accomplished was incredible. Every colony, every research station, every merchant ship had been part of a coordinated effort to prepare for this exact moment. Though image changed again to show human fleet formations that were larger and more advanced than anything the Council Intelligence services had reported these were not the small defensive forces of a species trying to protect their homeworlds. These were the organized battle groups of a civilization that had been planning for war from the very beginning. Major Kong Ji-woo smiled as he saw Counselor Thrackmore rocky form actually take a step backward. The mountain-like being had probably never retreated from anything in his entire existence, but the sight of human military might was clearly making him reconsider his assumptions about this young species counselor. Zephyros floated closer to the holographic display, his translucent body pulsing with patterns that showed deep concern. "This is impossible," he said through the translation devices. "Your species has only had space travel for a few centuries. You cannot have built such forces without our knowledge." Dr. Lee Minho stepped forward to address the floating council member directly. "That, counselor, is where you made your first mistake. You assumed that because we were young we were also naive. You thought that because we seemed peaceful we were also weak. But humanity has a long history of preparing for wars that everyone else thought would never come." The hologram shifted once more to show detailed analysis of Council military tactics and weaknesses. Human scientists had studied every battle the Council had ever fought. They had identified patterns in their strategy, flaws in their technology, and gaps in their defenses that could be exploited by a sufficiently prepared enemy. Kim Taeho voice carried clearly through the stunned silence in the chamber. "Every species you have conquered before made the same mistake. They waited until you demanded tribute before they started thinking about resistance. They tried to negotiate or fight with whatever forces they happened to have ready at that moment." The Admiral gestured toward the holographic display, which now showed comparative analysis between Council forces and human military capabilities. "We did not make that mistake. We started preparing for this day before we ever left our home solar system. We knew that eventually we would meet someone like you, and we decided to be ready." Captain Park Sora watched as more and more alien beings in the chamber began showing signs of real fear. Some were making distress calls to their home worlds, while others seemed to be calculating whether they could escape from the chamber before things got worse. The confidence and arrogance that had filled the room when the humans first arrived was draining away like water through a broken dam. The holographic display showed one final image that made several council members actually cry out in alarm. It was a real-time view of space around the council homeworld, showing human fleets already in position and waiting for orders. The beings who thought they were completely safe in their seat of power suddenly realized they were already surrounded. Counselor vexed scales flashed through every color in rapid succession as he tried to process what he was seeing. "This change is nothing human," he said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had carried before. "Your preparations may give you strength, but we have held power for 10,000 years. We have resources beyond your comprehension." Lieutenant Commander Choi Soo-jin stepped forward, her young voice carrying the determination of an entire generation that had grown up knowing this day would come. "Counselor, you have resources, but we have something much more valuable. We have unity. Every human colony, every ship, every person has been working toward this single goal for decades." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the quiet that comes when everyone realizes that everything they thought they knew has just changed forever. The council members who had expected to add another species to their list of tributaries were instead facing the possibility of their first real challenge in millennia. Darlie Minho looked around the chamber, taking in the shocked and worried faces of beings who had ruled the galaxy through fear and intimidation. "You see, honored council members, humanity learned something important from studying your history. Fear only works when your victims believe they have no choice. But we have spent 50 years creating choices you never imagined possible." Major Kong Ji-woo's hand rested on his weapon, not because he planned to use it, but because he finally felt like he might not need to. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting right before their eyes, and for the first time in human history, his species was not the weaker party in a negotiation. Kim Taeho reached out and touched the device again, making the holographic display disappear. The chamber seemed darker without its light, but somehow the humans looked more visible and more dangerous than they had before. "We came here today not to surrender or to negotiate, but to deliver a message. The age of tribute is ending. The question now is what kind of galaxy we will build to replace it." The silence in the great chamber stretched on and on as the full meaning of humanity revelation sank into the minds of every alien being present. What had started as a routine tribute collection had turned into something that would change the galaxy forever. The council members, who had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for thousands of years, were facing their first real challenge since they had come to power. Counselor Vextar massive serpentine form had stopped moving entirely. His scales had turned a pale gray color that meant he was in deep shock. The great alien leader was trying to understand how such a young species had managed to prepare so thoroughly for this confrontation without any of his intelligence networks. Detecting their activities, Admiral Kim Taeho stood quietly in the center of the platform, watching the alien reactions with the calm patience of a man who had already made peace with whatever consequences might follow. He had delivered his species message and shown their strength. Now it was up to the council to decide how they wanted to respond to this new reality. Darlie Minho could see the wheels turning in the minds of the various council members. Some were clearly thinking about immediate military action, while others seemed to be considering the possibility of negotiation for the first time in their long lives. A few appeared to be calculating whether they could simply ignore humanity and pretend this confrontation had never happened. The younger alien beings in the chamber were whispering frantically to their elders, asking questions about protocols and procedures that had never been needed before. Many of them had been born into a galaxy where council dominance was simply accepted. As a natural law, they had no experience with actual resistance or rebellion. Captain Park Sora felt the communication device in her hands, vibrating softly as messages poured in from human settlements across the galaxy. The news of their confrontation with the council was spreading faster than light as human ships carried the word from system to system. People who had lived their entire lives in fear of alien invasion were suddenly learning that their species was not helpless after all. Commander Choi Sujin watched the alien faces around them with growing confidence. She could see doubt and uncertainty, replacing the arrogance and contempt that had filled the chamber when they first arrived. The beings who had thought they were witnessing another routine surrender were instead seeing the birth of a new era in galactic politics. Councillor Thrackmore shifted his massive rocky bulk, nervously causing small avalanches of stone to fall from his body to the chamber floor. His voice rumbled like distant thunder when he finally spoke. "You speak of ending the age of tribute human, but you do not understand the forces you are challenging. Order must be maintained. Chaos must be prevented." Major Kong Ji-woo stepped forward too, answered the mountain-like being. "We understand perfectly, Counselor. The question is whether that order will be based on fear and slavery or on cooperation and mutual respect. Humanity has shown that we are prepared for either path. The choice is yours." Translation devices throughout the chamber hummed and sparked as they worked to convert the growing babble of alien voices into understandable language. Representatives from dozens of different species were arguing among themselves about what this development meant for their own worlds. Some seemed excited by the possibility of change, while others appeared terrified of losing their positions in the established hierarchy. Counselor Zephyros floated closer to the human delegation, his translucent body pulsing with complex patterns of light that showed deep thought and calculation. "Even if your military preparations are as extensive as you claim, you are still one species against thousands. We have allies and resources throughout the galaxy." Lee Minho smiled at the floating council member. "That is true, Counselor, but you are assuming that all of those allies are happy with the current arrangement. Many of the species in this chamber pay tribute to you just as you wanted us to do. How do you think they will react when they learn that resistance is possible?" Wave of nervous energy swept through the chamber as the implications of the diplomat words became clear. The representatives of tributary species began looking at each other with new expressions. Some showed hope for the first time in generations, while others seemed terrified of what might happen if they were caught plotting against Council authority. Kim Tae-ho raised his hand for silence, and somehow his simple gesture commanded more attention than all the alien shouting and posturing. The Admiral voice carried clearly through the vast space as he delivered what everyone knew would be his final statement. "Honored members of the Galactic Council of Humanity did not come here to destroy your civilization or to seek revenge for the countless species you have enslaved. We came here to offer you a choice. You can continue trying to rule through fear and force, knowing that you now face an enemy who will never surrender, or you can join us in building something better." The human delegation began walking toward the chamber exit, their footsteps echoing clearly in the stunned silence. Captain Park Sora kept the communication device active so that humans across the galaxy could hear every word. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sujin felt pride swelling in her chest as she realized that her species had just changed the course of galactic history as they reached the massive doors that led out of the chamber. Kim Tae-ho turned back one final time to address the thousands of alien beings who were watching their departure. "We leave you now to consider your options, but remember this, our answer will always be the same. It was no yesterday, it is no today, and it will be no tomorrow and every day after that." Lee Minho paused at the threshold and looked back at the council platform where the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in shocked silence. "For 10,000 years you have asked the same a question of every species you encountered. Today, for the first time, you have received an answer that you did not expect. Perhaps it is time to start asking different questions." The human delegation walked through the doors and disappeared from view, but their impact on the chamber continued to reverberate like shock waves from an explosion. Alien beings who had accepted council rule as an unchangeable fact of life were suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew about power and resistance. Major Kong Ji-woo was the last human to leave the chamber. He stopped just outside the doorway and spoke loud enough for everyone inside to hear. "The age of tribute is over. The age of choice has begun. Choose wisely." As the great doors closed behind the humans, the chamber erupted once again, but this time the sounds were different. Instead of the confident discussions of rulers deciding the fate of another species, these were the desperate arguments of beings who suddenly realized that their entire way of life was under threat across the galaxy. The news of humanity defiance spread like wildfire. The species that had paid tribute for centuries began whispering about resistance. Young beings who had never known freedom started asking their elders why they had accepted slavery. Council governors on distant worlds reported growing unrest and questions about authority that had never been challenged before it. The depths of space human fleets maintained their positions around key council worlds not as an immediate threat but as a promise that the age of unopposed council dominance was finally over. The single word that had started everything continued to echo through the galaxy, changing everything it touched, nor it was such a simple word, but it carried the power to reshape entire civilizations. The beings who had thought they ruled forever were learning that nothing lasts when enough people decide they have had enough. The galaxy would never be the same again, and it had all started with one species that refused to kneel.